Saturday Night Live. I'm reading The Only Planet of Choice, Essential Briefing from Deep Space. I'm now reading chapter 13. It's there are certain subsections, and chapter 13 is under the subsection Vital Links in the Chain. It's entitled Hoovid, Branchings, Hebrew Roots, and the Crescent. You will find that some of the things, questions and so on are repeated. That's why I just thought I had already recorded this, because this is a compilation of things which took 18 years to do. Some of the questions come up again in different times, between the 70s and 80s. It was published in 1993. So this is page 165, and the subsection is Vital Links in the Chain. Chapter 13, Hoovid, Branchings, Hebrew Roots, and the Crescent. Exploring the connection between the Hoovids and the Ishmaels and the Middle East in relation to these matters, this chapter is of vital importance to our understanding of the planet and our contribution to the universe. While reading, it would be well to remember Tom's observation that, before you criticize the Hoovids, reflect that you might well have Hoovid genes yourself. Irene, please tell us of the sons of heaven marrying the daughters of earth. Tom, you know that in the World Book, the Bible, utilized upon planet Earth, there is an essence of truth and a great deal of human corruption for keeping humankind in bondage. You know also that the Hoovids and other civilizations came to this planet Earth for colonization and for the preparation of planet Earth. Also, upon this planet Earth, there were those beings that existed and emerged from the essence of the Earth. Then those of the Hoovid and other civilizations, what on the Earth they called gods or sons of the gods, merged with the daughters of humanity. This is why all humankind looks to the heavens as the source of their beginning, for they were derived from the heavens. And also there were some civilizations or sub-civilizations that were able to come for the impregnation of women of humankind and to set their stream. And in the time of Aksu the hawk came, and then the Hoovids were chosen for the implantation of individuality and determination, and perhaps an ingredient of tenacity. And over time we saw that those elements became stronger, at times to the point of corrupting the beneficial qualities of tenacity, determination and individuality. Then came the Nazarene, who is the head of the Hoover, in order to soften that individualism. It was a great necessity, but we do not remove individualism or free will, but we needed to expand compassion, for in the need for survival, compassion was not developed. Compassion is now an element of development. Irene, but this question of compassion goes back to before Abraham. It goes back to the garden, to Aksu. Tom, that is correct. They were Hoovids. You see, the problem there was knowing full well who they were, where they came from, and knowing of the orientation of the opposition. It was a matter of obedience. The Hoovids did not obey, and have not obeyed since, in spite of all the rituals and asking for the Almighty to intervene and all prayers being directed to the Almighty. Higher elements within the Hoovids understand this is pointless, for the Hebrews must take responsibility. But those higher elements, those of the Kabbalah, are not accepted by those who stay in ritual. Ritual, but not to the exclusion of all other things. There is an error. They believe that they must study the word to the exclusion of all other things, for they feel that they will be their connection, and some might not have understanding or compassion for others. They set themselves up on a pinnacle, and they do not comprehend that by doing they are putting themselves as a target for slaughter. Do you understand? Yes, Irene says. Tom, most of the civilized world contains these elements, for they have spread and multiplied across planet Earth. Within the nation of Israel they are identified and intensified. But you need to be aware that this has come about through human life, for in the center they are the purest and gentlest. Are we now confusing you? Irene, no, not at all. One of my questions has been, why is there so much the Jewish people throughout the world, and what is going on beneath the surface. Israel, for it is a representative microcosm of the entire planet Earth, and thus Israel is important, for Earth is unique, and no other planet exists like it in the universe. All these years the others have bounded. Irene, so once the Hoovids are released to their true selves, the other 23 civilizations will then be able to do their work more fully on planet Earth? Tom, that is correct, for they are bound and hindered by this element of obstinacy in the Hoovids. We know of the essence of the Hoovids, the abilities, the genetic code, the DNA of the Hoovids, their life force. When that is released, the universe is released. A very large order, yes? John, so the Hoovids came 3 times. Are you talking about the first time being Adam and Eve, the second time Abraham, and the third time Jesus? You may put it like that, but in truth they came as the Eve of Adam. Then the implantation was before Adam, and the development was the nation of Abraham. You see? Irene, when did the competition with the Creator begin, and why? And also, was that a testing of obedience? Tom, it was a testing of obedience, and it began when they left Ur. Before that, they listened and viewed. You see, Abraham began the testing, for he knew that he contained within him the essence of all creation. He also knew that he contained within him all knowledge. He also had this strong connection with creation, and therefore, when asked for the sacrifice of his son, he knew innately that he could do that. For in the acceptance and the doing, it would not be necessary. First lesson, humankind has forgotten. We have constantly reiterated the importance of acceptance. For them, you no longer need to accept. For then, you no longer need to accept. But the descendants of Abraham lost the internal knowledge. They only kept the knowledge of who they were and their need for survival. They did not accept total obedience. They were always making deals. Where one group would be in awe of creation, the Hoovids would look at the creation as something to be utilized. Irene, that's how they survived. That's correct. And in the surviving, they lost certain elements of awe and obedience, yes? Andrew, Tom, could you explain why you chose the Israelites many years ago for the Jehovah leader? What the plan was and how it is working out in terms of the religion's historic beliefs that they live under? Tom, yes, they are a nation of people with strength. They came from an area of planet of strength. Andrew, you mean that they are seed that came from another planet to Earth? Tom, yes, they came from Hoover. They have strength within their character, and also because the planet from which they came was a warrior-like planet. In their seeding here, they were asked to be at peace. Andrew, and historically, how was it planned for them to act as catalysts and leaders among the peoples of the earth, as they seem to have done? Tom, we asked them to work according to plan. The only problem was at the time of the man called the Nazarene. In their minds, in their culture, they knew, and in the end, and in the seed of their soul. If you understood their origin, you would then understand the factors of doubt and questioning. Part of the reason for their existence on this planet was to overcome that factor. Andrew, that I can understand. Have they been successful or not? Tom, they were not successful at the time of the man you call Jesus. Andrew, was Jesus truly in the model of their expectations of the Messiah? Tom, yes, but because of their nature, they mostly did not recognize him, and throughout the generations within them lives the knowledge that they have made an error. But because of pride, they will not acknowledge this. Do you understand? Andrew, yes. Tom, so from this aspect, we arrive at a nation that is fierce with pride, and from this grew the desire to help their own nation. So in effect, our plan was turned that around. Yeah, this is really their salvation, because it shows the nations of earth that they are a nation that will not be conquered. In spite of the fact that they made an error, every nation has made an error. Andrew, yes. Is there any possibility of rectifying that error and still saving their pride? Tom, they will come to acceptance. Andrew, there is the small matter of names. The difference between he whom we call Jehovah, and he whom we call Jesus, or Jeshua. They are one and the same. John, could you tell us about the nation on Earth related to Althea? Tom, the primary concern for this planet is the Hoovers. Althea is here to help in the situation, as brother would help another brother. Andrew, yes, but the relationship between what you planned in Egypt as a civilization and what Moses learned from that, and what he carried into his relationship with Hoover, and then what was carried by the tradition into the latter period, all these things are of great interest. It seems to be a continuous thread, even though much of it has been lost. Am I saying the right thing? You are correct, Tom says. Andrew, so it was most necessary that Moses learn all the deepest secrets of the Egyptian tradition in order to know who he was and what his role was. Yes. Andrew, which of course he never revealed. I suppose it was forbidden at the time, was it not? Tom, yes. Guest, in the early days of Israel, there was much bloodshed and violence, particularly when Joshua and the Jewish people moved into the Israel. After their 40 years in Sinai, can you illustrate why Jews sought to see non-Jewish people as the enemies of God, to the extent that they killed so many people when they returned to Israel? Tom, why did the Christians see so many people as the enemies of God when they found non-Christian? Guest, that was not a precedent started by the Jews, perhaps? Tom, that is not so. This is the reasoning why Hoover announced to Moses that the land they were taken out belonged to them. What you have not considered is that when the Israelites were given something what was their place, they were uprooted and enslaved, as they were told by Hoover of the understanding of one God, and that Israel was their place, and then the others did not wish them to enter. Do you understand those that are now, this was early 92, Serbians and Croatians? This war is tribal, is it not? Is tribalism not a basic animal instinct? Look at it this way. It is not tribal, is it not tribal with Ishmael? Therefore, why is it permitted for one group to be tribal, but not for the other? It is not true that you still have tribal conflict upon this planet, even in this time of the free thinking. Think of an animal such as a dog. You bring this animal into your home, then you bring another also. In the beginning, when you give them their food, the natural instinct in them will be to snarl and to attack. Is that not so? Now take a human. In those days, and even these days, if they have been beaten and subjected to inadequate life conditions, they are like a dog. It is only when the dog is repeatedly treated well and understands that it will always have food that it will stop attacking and taking from another. There is one difference with humans. They have that instinct of the dog, and they also have the emotion. Do not. Therefore, that basic instinct also fires up the emotions. Then reason does not come in. You still find in these primitive tribes who believe in their one God also, and they say they have been told this and that. So why do you then single out the Hoovers from others? What should you look upon for the Hoovers is this: a small group of people that have survived at all odds, a small group who have continued to educate and forward all of their peoples. This does not say there is perfection or the development of utter graciousness of personality. It is one group or nation does not hold its own bondage or is as downtrodden. We ask you, why should not the Hoovids have their way? Guest, yes, may I explain? As far as I understand, when Abraham arrived in Israel, he bought a plot of land. That seems to have been a sensible thing to do politically. There was also Moses, who had taught the Jewish people in the 10 Commandments about not killing and not stealing. Can you say something about that? Tom, there were only 2 commandments for the nations of Hova. Those 2 are, thou shalt not worship false gods, thou shalt do unto others as they want others to do unto you. Those are the only 2 commandments given to the nation of Hoover. There are many rules, the other 8 given to nations. So what has kept the nation of Hoover all of these millennia in those 2 commandments? So then we ask you, do you not understand? They are the only nation upon planet Earth that daily challenges their God. The only nation that has the impetus to fight with their God. They're not subservient. They challenge as you are now challenging. They challenge their God, their Hoover, and they will continue to do so, for they know and feel that they are one with him. Therefore, they have the right to challenge. Examples, some are in Afghanistan, some are in Ethiopia, some in North America, in the native white spirit people, in Phoenicians, in the people of the musical language, written of by Caesar, and in the Orientals. There is now the beginning of an understanding of the dispersal and the re-ingathering. Guest. So this dispersal, could you say it was an unconscious fulfillment of the task that the Jews came to the earth to fulfill? Tom, are you attempting to establish that it was acceptable for them to be dispersed because they then fulfilled what they did not originally? Guest. Not exactly, but I'm aware that it has been said that the Hoovids came in order to mix with the people of Earth. Tom, that is a truism, but that they stayed together, they did so because the others had been dispersed. If I would have a word of my own to say, would you like to hear? Guest, yes. I will ask the council if I may say it. They say I may. But you may not be pleased with this. It is this. We would have one warning to people who are working with higher consciousness, to be very cautious about your attitudes towards the Hoovids. For it may well be that you are a Hoovid also, yes? What we are attempting to say is that the majority of people that are involved in spiritual elevation contain the genes of Hoovids. So look upon what I say, and how you then place yourself in that. Councillor said I must convey that we have also great frustration, for perhaps in many of your eons we have not explained clearly the situation of the Hoovids. What continues to persist is the negating of Hoovids on planet Earth. Look at all the world and every nation, and see which negative characteristic developed that made that nation feel different from others. Your nation, England, believed you were superior to other nations, and your righteousness was the very essence of righteousness. When you have the ingathering of many and the clapping goes all around the world, then all will be free of the bondage of their bringing forth from their civilizations what was of the best. Andrew, there is one terrible burning question which every Israelite in the world wants to know. Why was it permitted for 6 million Jews to be killed during World War II? Tom, did you not know of others that have been killed? Andrew, yes, I know of many others, but these are the chosen people, and there must be a reason. It was not blind or accidental. Tom, it was the final bridging together of the Jews. Andrew, that's a difficult thing to tell to Jewish people. Tom, if you tell the truth, even in all sincerity, you will infuriate the nation of Israel, as they are always infuriated with such things. Perhaps it is better to try to make the world aware of the greatness of the nation of Israel. Andrew, still, this is a very delicate matter. Tom, explain that there is not a death in the world that has no consequence. Andrew, what happened to those 6 million souls who were sacrificed in this way? Tom, they are not stockpiled. Andrew, they have been freed. Tom, they in essence and in truth have returned to the civilization Hoover. Andrew, that's most important to know. Tom, the greatest portion of those 6 million came at that time to sacrifice self, to make your planet Earth aware that there were those that would attempt to rule and control humanity. And remember this too, as a result of the 6 million, the nation of Israel came into being. There is an anger in Israel against the 6 million for their method of going, without questioning, by being led like sheep to the slaughterhouse. But in them they knew that this was their choosing. This was why there was no comfort among the majority of them. On the one hand, this created disgust amongst the Germans, but on the other hand, it also created awe, that they could go in quietness. But within their souls they knew that they had chosen this, to forth the nation of Israel, and to make planet Earth aware that there are negative forces that could attempt to destroy all and to feed on the power of others. When the nation of Israel can accept within themselves that there was a majority of those, then there will be understanding. The method of extermination they did not choose. That is the karma of the nation of Germany, yes? Steve, As the aim is presumably to heighten consciousness on this planet, to unite the people of this planet, I find it very difficult to deal with the notion that the Israeli people are the chosen people. In this time, the idea of a chosen people is very difficult and rather retrograde concept. Tom, do you have the understanding that within the nation of Israel, it represents all the nations of your planet Earth? Do you understand when we use the term chosen, it is not necessarily to associate that term to them. What we're trying to say is that if they had followed their program, which they had chosen, there would be no need for the world situation you have now. For all the nations upon the planet Earth would be chosen. Do you understand that within the nation of Israel is a representative of each of the nations and races upon Earth? If you reach the nation of Israel, the energy would generate then to all the planets of Earth. What should have taken place thousands of years ago will then come into being. It is not that they are specifically chosen for what chosen to service. You do not buy service, you pay for service. They are paying for service. Being a chosen people is not necessarily like being an elite, for being chosen brings great difficulty. Steve, yes, it seems to me that perhaps they are one of the most difficult groups of people to bring round to higher consciousness. What appears to be happening is that higher consciousness has been generated among a large number of people scattered throughout the world. Tom, we have knowledge of what you are referring to, but consider this. If you imagine the universe as wholeness, and you see a black spot in the universe, which is the planet Earth, which has bottlenecked the evolution of the universe, and is stopping the growth of souls that should by this time have evolved further, and if you then look upon the planet Earth and see the nation of Israel as a black spot on planet Earth, it is important to reach the nation that is all nations within one nation, to raise the level of all the nations, yes? Steve, yes. What we have seen in the Western world in recent years, 1976, has been a conspicuous heightening of consciousness among younger people due to merging of Eastern and Western traditions. A flow of ideas, methods of consciousness training and such like from East to West. Is that not a valuable thing? Tom, if they take it and bring it into balance, we have explained that the East is not in true balance, nor is the West. It is important for you to understand that both need to be brought into balance. That is vitally important for planet Earth. The nation of Israel is a blend of both. Steve, yes, that's true. Only, Tom, what you are asking concerning Israel is a question that will be asked by many. Well, yes, that's why I'm asking it. Tom, the people of Earth tend to reject the nation of Israel, but they are yet to recognize within them that the greatest portion of humankind also contains a portion of the nation of Israel within themselves, and thus also has the same tendencies that they feel are attributable to the nation of Israel. Guest, in what way are the Jewish people any different? Is there something special about their relationship to the land of Israel? Tom, those of the nation of Israel came to planet Earth many thousands of years. They came to evolve your planet Earth. And in their genetics, they know their choosing. And they relate closely to the Creator. For the memory is coming from the innermost. But what this in actuality means is that they have a great responsibility. They have a great responsibility. For their ability to elevate planet Earth into a collective consciousness that may bring all people into their proper place, so that planet Earth may then fulfill unity in the universe. They are a people that have great energies, that have great ability in their genetics. The people of Israel also have the ability to bring into the essence with their minds all that they desire, but also all that they fear. Israel is a microcosm of Earth, and as the nation of Israel is affected, so is the planet. Guest, how can Jews elevate the planet? I didn't quite understand. Tom, the nation of Israel has within it powers that can release in humankind all that is buried, all that may be brought forth into light. As they hold this code, they also reject this code, for they are the greatest of skeptics upon your earth. They reject it, for inwardly they have the knowledge that it brings forth great responsibility. The minds of the people of Israel have an energy such that what they fear they create for themselves, and what they project in positivity they bring into reality. Everyone on planet Earth in their creation of thought can bring it to fruition, but in the nation of Israel this is magnified and can thus create, if the thoughts are emotional or lacking clarity, imbalance within your planet Earth, yes? John, what would you recommend to the people of Israel? What could help in their job, both for themselves and for others? Tom, the most important aspect is to understand that the universe is with them. By their thinking they do not permit it to flow through them. When there is dissension within, it creates greater dissension without. It is time for all to come together in understanding each other. And when we say this, we mean all the tribes within the nation of Israel. When Israel people fear creating a situation in which they feel all the world against them, then they bring that into their reality. The error of the nation of Israel is that they accept their specialness without taking responsibility. People who are not Hebrew are in a difficult situation to tell them that they are not special and to get them off their backside. They need to understand the overcoming of apathy. They need the information and knowledge that no one will do it for them, even Jehovah, and that they must do it themselves, particularly because they have the ability to do so. They are conditioned to believe that they are entitled to do what they themselves feel is best. This needs to be communicated gently. David, so this is a question of self-empowerment. Tom, that is the key. It takes only one person to begin the process. The nation of Israel is in serious difficulty, in great troubles at this time, 1976. Israel, in its state of consciousness, of uneasiness, of aggressiveness within itself, is radiating an energy. It has become a nationalist of thoughts. There is much anger among all, and they cannot do anything to bring themselves out. They do not understand that they are creating the difficulty. The nations surrounding it also create difficulty, and this radiates out into the world. In relationship to catastrophes, we will not permit catastrophes to completely remove and to deprive Earth's souls. What we are trying to say is, those that communicate in negativity are in a realm that is using their emotion, their trauma, and is not of the purest. And then in 1980, we are attempting to prepare Israel for understanding. There are more great intellects within the nation of Israel than in many lands, though there is in truth more emotionalism of minds that are not in control, minds that emotions control rather than minds controlling emotions. Because of this energy of the nation of Israel, those that exist upon planet Earth cannot move forward. Those who oppose keeping the nations of Israel in imbalance and unbalance, for they affect things through emotion. The ego of those that exist in the nation of Israel is not in balance. Their emotions control their mind. It is with great sadness that we say this, for if they attempt to learn and do control their minds, then they may move the nation of Israel into the highest realm. Hoovids must learn to cultivate detachment from their emotions, so those of the opposition cannot use them, for the oppositions are parasites of mind that would like to control, disrupt, destroy. They have done that to the nation of Israel. The people of Israel are controlled by their emotions. Their emotions are controlled by those that oppose, for they live on that energy. The nation of intellectual genius has given that genius away. In this time, 1988, the importance of creating a direction of transformation to bring about true transformation upon planet Earth must begin in Israel. The nation of Israel, being a microcosm of the whole world, contains within it energies of all. In truthfulness, knowing that the Israelites are from Hoover, we also know that the change will have some difficulty. We underestimated the intensity of the effect of density on the peoples of planet Earth, and of the fears of those upon it, brought about by the others. Therefore, there has been the greatest of delay. We also had the hope that the Hoovids would understand their purpose within their core and would begin Earth's transformation. Again, however, we had underestimated the individualism of the creative being. Now it is of the greatest importance that this information begins, for your planet Earth is on a threshold, and in attaining and reaching the energies of this nation, of Israel, which is a representation of earth, the unbottlenecking of the bottleneck began. How does Jehovah look at the situation at this point? Tom, with the greatest of tears for his nation, the nation of Israel, in there, may we say, explain the situation. The nation of Israel makes judgment on what is important or not important for their self-image in the world. That is a form of lack of communication, and this creates difficulty in the rest of the world, for the Hoovids feel that in their mind they know, and that's enough. It must be understood that the time has passed when they may keep only to themselves. It is important that communication not be judgmental of what is important and not, for all peoples are different, and all peoples have a need to understand other peoples. This is the biggest difficulty, for because of the lack of communication, those outside Israel then think that the Israel nation considers them inferior. The peoples of the world have only one way of understanding each other, and that is through communication. As the nations of the continent of Europe are unifying, so then know in truth that the nations of other continents may also unify. And to a group of meditators in 1980, they said, focus your attention for the unification of other areas also, and keep foremost in your mind the understanding that the nation of Israel is a microcosm for planet Earth. What is important is energy for the integration of wholeness and completion, to bring peace between the children of Abraham, for Ishmael is from Abraham also. John, you replied once that it might be important for the Jewish people to come to a recognition of who Jesus was. Tom, there are many amongst the Hebrews who understand and accept that the Nazarene was a teacher. Was it difficult? What is difficult is for them to understand is the affiliation of Jehovah with the civilization of Hoover. As you know, the gods of the Hebrew was maintained to be a jealous God. They misunderstood that totally, completely. And they also do not understand that these beings to whom they have given the term God, not just the Hoovids, but gods, of all the major religions and their spin-offs, were of physicalness, made into gods by humans on earth. That is now at a stage of evolution. It is those who come from Ishmael who are currently, October 1990, in the greatest difficulty, for their zeal has no respect for life, where the Hoovids had and have respect. Do you understand the difference? Those from Ishmael do not permit others to fulfill their physical life upon planet Earth for its full evolutionary circle. Guest, there seems to be a lot of focus on the Jewish people and their position in the world, and I wonder if you could provide a little more information concerning the Islamic people, which might help balance things a bit. Tom, what you are asking we have explained often, and you say that we have approached positively to those of Hoover and not to those of Ishmael. Guest, not exactly, but it can appear that way, that a lot of attention has been on the Jewish people. Tom, that has been of necessity. We ask of you this. Are not the Buddha, the Hindu, those of the great white spirit mentioned? May we ask why you must speak in oftenness of Ishmael? Guest, for me it has been mainly a desire to balance things up a little. How can you balance what is not balanced? You need to hear what we have said. You have not understood the purpose of the nation of Israel. Guest, I was wondering what were the positive contributions of the Arabic people to the world as a whole. For example, the Secretary General of the United Nations, 1992, is a man from Egypt, a Christian married to a Jew, and this seemed to me to be a significant thing. Tom, all Arabic people do not have Islam. There is a difference. Arabic people have contributed in greatness to earth in terms of past, in literature, colors, science. What has stopped that growth is the conformity of some religious sections in Islam. We do not place all in a pot, as we do not place all the Hoovids in a pot. Closer to reality are those that follow Jethro and the daughter of Fatima. Could you explain more about the influence of Jethro? Tom, it is similar to those that they call themselves followers of Christ. The followers of Jehovah, which is in truth a sect. Fatima and Jethro are a sect of Islam, and of them they identify as prophet. Guest, what is the possible contribution Arabs can make to the world? And what do they need to learn in order to make this contribution? If you tell them they need to learn, they will be greatly anguished by you. Guest: yes, however, we all need to learn things. Tom: you know that. Many individuals in the mass understand that. But when a mass is totally controlled by religious leaders, it cannot accept learning from others. What is of necessity is the allowance for others to live also. What is necessary also is the allowance of complete education for their mothers. For keeping their mothers in ignorance then breeds ignorance also. We speak now of leadership of a nation that believes a woman has less value than the corruption. It was once the same in your own states, but with education and non-ignorance it moved forward. For in controlling women, nations stop their own growth. They have convinced those mothers that it is beneficial for them to be less than they are. It is the will of their civilization. John: what was the part of the influence of the fallen one? Was that the part of the influence of the fallen one? Tom: yes. John: because it kept them in bondage. Tom: kept. That nation was not dispersed. John: do you have anything to say about Jerusalem and its current history of being divided and then unhappily reunited? Tom: Jerusalem is the primary area of discontent. It must be unified, in truth. For it does not belong to Islam, it does not belong to Christianity, and it does not belong to the nation of Israel. If it belongs to anyone, it belongs to us. We are saddened that it is not unified, but we must say the nation of Israel has protected it better than all others. We would wish that the people in that area begin to understand that they walk upon hallowed earth, and when it is unified, the world is unified. Guest: not long ago I woke up with the idea that Jerusalem needs to become an international city. Tom: that is not only yours, that has been thought of in the minds of many. Know that neither the forces of Ishmael nor those of Israel would agree with it at this time. The Ishmaels believe that by their possessing it, the God of the Jews cannot return. Therefore, then, they can remove the Jews. The nation of Israel will not agree with it. For when the Ishmaels had possession of it, they permitted all peoples except Jews to enter their own holy sites, and they destroyed the holy sites of the Jews, and desecrated their holy places with facial matter. When the nation of Israel is in charge, all people, including Arabs, may enter. You understand the difference? Until that painful memory of the desecration is removed from consciousness, Jerusalem cannot be at peace, and that will come soon, but until that time, there is that locked energy around. Guess, one of the daring thoughts I had is that the UN is likely to look for a new center for itself, and I was wondering, is it a correct possibility that Jerusalem could become a center for the United Nations? Tom: the United Nations would devastate Jerusalem, for those who enter from most nations are not respectful to others. A central unified city that all may enter would be acceptable, but Jerusalem may not be ruled by, you understand, the United Nation is not united. And you also understand that the United Nation, in moving, would wish to build monstrous edifices. Tom: we wish you to know this. As it is here, it is also above. Therefore, we now link with you in meditation to bring about peace, balance, harmony, and removal of fear and hatred. For the Hoovids to accept their true purpose. For Hoovids not to have fear of loving again in joy and trust. And to remove the hatred from the Ishmaels. For the Ishmaels to forgive their journey in the desert. To forgive the Hoovids. To forgive Sarah and Abraham, now that the Hoovids and Ishmael may be true brothers. This was chapter 13. Next one is going to be chapter 14, entitled The Covenant, and I read that later. Happy Saturday.